In this lecture, we're going to talk about the light-independent reaction of photosynthesis, also called the dark reaction. And so it's the part that occurs without the need for sunlight. Quickly first, we'll review the light reaction. So remember, during the light reaction, sunlight was our energy source, and it was used to produce high energy molecules, ATP and NADPH. These molecules are not very stable, meaning that they break down in a few minutes. So that's why plants use them to transfer energy in the short term, but not for long-term storage. In the dark reaction, we're going to use energy molecules that were produced in the light reaction. Remember, those molecules were called ATP and NADPH, and we're going to use those to produce sugars. The dark reaction can occur in the light or dark because it doesn't need photons directly to drive activity. It's going to occur until the ATP and NADPH are used up. So the energy source for this reaction needs sunlight, but this reaction does not need sunlight. It's also called the Calvin cycle, and it occurs in the stroma of the chloroplasts. So during the first phase of the dark reactions, carbon dioxide enters the cycle. So it enters the leaf from the atmosphere. On the bottom side of a leaf, you have a structure called a stomate, and that allows carbon dioxide gas into the leaf. Then an enzyme that's in the stroma of the chloroplasts takes the carbon dioxide molecules and it combines them with 5 carbon molecules in the organelle to make 3 carbon compounds. For every 6 carbon dioxides that enter, it develops 12 3-carbon compounds. So here's a diagram of how that process works. We start with the addition of 6 carbon dioxide molecules into the plant cell. So you can see here they've entered the cycle. Then those carbon dioxide molecules bind with a 5-carbon molecule. In the diagram it's here. Otherwise, we can go over to the drawing that I did of just the carbons. So if you start with a 5-carbon molecule, there's 5 C's, 1 for each carbon. And you add a carbon from a carbon dioxide molecule. The oxygen gas is going to leave because that's a waste product. And then if you take the carbon from the carbon dioxide and bind it to the 5-carbon molecule, you get a 6-carbon compound here. And if you take that 6-carbon compound and split it in half, you get 2 3-carbon molecules. So those 3 carbon molecules are what we get after our carbon dioxide has entered the cycle. It has joined this 5-carbon compound to make a 6-carbon compound, and they split in half to make a 3-carbon compound. So at this point in our cycle, we have a 3-carbon compound, meaning there's 3 carbon atoms, and it's about to experience some other changes. Once those 3 carbon compounds have been formed, some of them are removed from the cycle. 2, to be exact, of the 12 that we created with the 6 carbons that came in. These are the ones that are going to become sugars eventually, and then potentially also lipids, amino acids, and other structural molecules. So now we're going to look at those 3 carbon compounds in the diagram. So again, here's our 12 3-carbon compounds that we made during the last step. They're going to go through some changes, and we're going to use some of the energy, like the ATP and the NADPH, to change them a little bit, but they still have 3 carbons. So they're going to be 3 carbons until 2 of those molecules leave the cycle altogether. These 2 carbon compounds are going to go on to become sugars or other compounds. That leaves us with 10 remaining compounds, or 3-carbon compounds, that are going to be used again in this cycle. So in this last phase of the cycle, ATP is used to convert the remaining 10 3-carbon compounds into 6 5-carbon compounds. So essentially we're just rearranging atoms, right? We're taking 10 3-carbon compounds, which turns out equals 30 carbon atoms, and we're going to rearrange those into 6 5-carbon molecules, which incidentally is also 30 carbon atoms. So basically we have 30 carbon atoms to work with. We started with 3 carbon compounds and there was 10 of them. We converted them using some chemical reactions into 5 carbon compounds. and there's 6 of them. And then these are going to be recycled because they're the 5 carbon compounds that we started with when we began in phase 1. So here we return once more to our diagram. Remember, we lost 2 of the carbon compounds because those are going to go become sugars. And then we have 10 remaining, and that are going to get recycled. So we're going to take those 30 different carbon atoms, and we're going to use ATP, and we're going to convert them into 5 carbon molecules, and there's 6 of them. But remember, we never change the number of carbons. There's always 30 carbons here and 30 carbons here. We've just rearranged how they're shaped. And then that 5 carbon compound can go ahead and join a new carbon dioxide molecule, and it can start the process over again. The name of this entire process is the Calvin cycle, and it uses 6 carbon dioxide molecules to make 1 6-carbon sugar. It uses energy that's provided by the light reaction. Remember, the molecules that came from the light reaction are ATP and NADPH. And then the energy that is stored in the sugar that we made, the sugar that you make first, typically in plants, is glucose, is used for storage, for energy, and for building structures within the plant. This process can be affected by a few different things. Temperature is really important for plants. Enzymes that do this work are most functional between 0 and 35 degrees Celsius, which means that if a plant is in freezing temperatures, which in Celsius is below 0, it doesn't work because water freezes, and that's where you need to have chemicals dissolved in water to be functional. So if it gets too hot or too cold, this process doesn't work. It also needs light. High intensity light speeds up photosynthesis, so that makes plants grow and photosynthesize more quickly. And water is also really important because it's used up in photosynthesis. Remember, it's broken apart during photosystem 2 in the light reactions in order to release electrons and hydrogen ions. So if there's no water, there's no photosynthesis. That's why you need to water your plants.